All right, welcome back for part 7 of the AWS Security Specialty exam walkthrough. This is the addendum. This goes over the questions, answers, and explanations. Remember to like, subscribe, and share, but we'll get started. A security engineer is designing a solution that will provide end-to-end encryption between clients and Docker containers running and ECS. The solution will also handle volatile traffic patterns. What would have the most scalability and lowest latency? Configure a network load balancer with a TCP listener to pass through TLS traffic to the containers. A network load balancer with TCP pass-through maintains end-to-end encryption by allowing containers to terminate TLS directly. This provides lowest latency as there's no encryption-decryption at the load balancer level and scales efficiently with volatile traffic patterns. Security engineer has noticed an unusually high amount of traffic coming from a single IP. This was discovered by analyzing the application load balancer's access logs. How can the engineer limit the number of requests from a specific IP without blocking the IP address? Implement a rate-based rule with AWS WAF. WAF rate-based rules allow limiting requests per IP address over a specified time period without completely blocking access. This provides traffic throttling capabilities while maintaining availability for legitimate requests from the same IP. A security engineer has several thousand Amazon EC2s split across production and development environments. Each instance is tagged with its environment. The engineer needs to analyze and patch all the development EC2s to ensure they're not exposed to any common vulnerabilities or exposures. What combinations of steps is most efficient way to meet these requirements? Install the inspector agent on all dev instances. Configure inspector to perform a scan using the CVE rule package on all instances tagged as being in the dev environment. Install the EC2 Systems Manager agent on all dev instances. Issue the run command to EC2 Systems Manager to update all instances. Inspector provides automated CVE scanning with tag-based targeting for efficient vulnerability assessment. Systems Manager enables centralized patch management across tagged instances, providing both vulnerability detection and remediation capabilities. An app running on EC2s generates log files in a folder on a Linux file system. The instances block access to the console and file transfer utilities such as Secure Copy Protocol, SCP, and Secure File Transfer Protocol, SFTP. The app support team wants to automatically monitor the application log files so the team can set up notifications in the future. The security engineer must design a solution that meets the following requirements. Make the log files available through an AWS managed service, allow for automated monitoring of the logs, provide an interface for analyzing logs, and minimize effort. What approach meets these standards? Install the unified CloudWatch agent on the instances, configure the agent to collect the application log files on the EC2 file system, and send them to Amazon CloudWatch logs. The CloudWatch agent automatically streams log files to CloudWatch logs without requiring network access protocols. CloudWatch logs provides monitoring, alerting, and analysis capabilities through a managed service with minimal configuration effort. To meet regulatory requirements, a security engineer needs to implement an IAM policy that restricts the use of AWS services to US East 1, which should the engineer implement. The correct policy uses a condition that denies actions when the requested region is not US East 1, using AWS requested region condition key. Regional restriction policies use the AWS requested region condition key to enforce service usage only in specified regions. The policy should deny access when the requested region does not match the allowed region, US East 1. The company has a VPC with an IPv6 address range and a public subnet with an IPv6 address block. The VPC currently hosts some public EC2s, but the security engineer needs to migrate a separate application into the VPC that also requires IPv6 connectivity. This application will occasionally make API requests to an external internet accessible endpoint to receive updates. However, the team does not want the app's EC2s exposed to the internet. The security engineer intends to create a private subnet with a custom route table and associate the route table with the private subnet. What else does a security engineer need to do to ensure the application will not be exposed directly to the internet, but can still communicate as requested? Add an egress-only internet gateway to the VPC. Update the custom route table with a new route to the gateway. Egress-only internet gateways allow outbound IPv6 internet connectivity while preventing inbound connections from the internet. This provides the required API access while maintaining security by preventing direct internet exposure of the application. Security engineer accidentally deleted the imported key material in an AWS KMS CMK. What should the engineer do to restore the deleted key material? Download a new wrapping key and a new import token. Import the original key material into the existing CMK. When the imported key material is deleted, new wrapping keys and import tokens must be generated for security regions. The original key material can be re-imported into the same CMK using a new wrapping key and import token. Authorized administrators are unable to connect to an EC2 Linux bastion host using SSH over the internet. The connection either fails to respond or generates a network error, connection timed out error message. What could be responsible for the connection failure? The internet gateway of the VPC has been reconfigured. The route table is missing a route to the internet gateway. The host-based firewall is denying SSH traffic. SSH connectivity issues can result from internet gateway problems, missing routes to the internet gateway, or host-based firewall rules blocking SSH traffic. These are the most common causes of connection timeouts for bastion hosts. A company is setting up products to deploy in AWS Service Catalog. Management is concerned when the users launch products, elevated IAM privileges will be required to create resources. How should the company mitigate this concern? Add a launch constraint to each product in the portfolio. Launch constraints allow Service Catalog to use specific IAM roles to provision resources rather than end users' permissions. This enables users to deploy products without requiring elevated privileges themselves. A company is configuring 3 Amazon EC2s with each instance in a separate availability zone. The EC2 will be used as a transparent proxy for outbound internet traffic for ports 80 and 443, so the proxies can block traffic to certain internet destinations as required by the company's security policies. However, the proxy EC2s are not successfully forwarding traffic to the internet. What should the security engineer do to make the proxy EC2s route traffic? Disable the source and destination checks on the proxy EC2 instances. EC2 instances by default have source and destination checking enabled, which prevents them from forwarding traffic where they are not the source or destination. Disabling this check is required for instances acting as proxies or NAT instances. A financial institution has security requirements for cloud-based users to be contained in a separate authentication domain and cannot access on-prem systems. As part of standing up a cloud environment, the financial institution is creating Amazon managed databases and Amazon EC2 instances. An Active Directory service exists on-prem that has all the admin accounts, and these must be able to access the databases and instances. How would the organization manage its resources in the most secure manner? Configure an AWS managed Microsoft Active Directory to manage the cloud resources. Establish a one-way trust relationship from the new Active Directory to the existing Active Directory service. AWS Managed Active Directory provides a separate authentication domain for cloud resources. A one-way trust from the cloud Active Directory to on-prem Active Directory allows on-prem admins to access cloud resources while preventing cloud users from accessing on-prem systems. A security engineer is managing a traditional three-tier web application that's running on EC2s. The app has become a target of an increasing number of malicious attacks from the internet. What steps should the engineer take to check for known vulnerabilities and limit the attack surface? Review the application security groups, ensure that only the necessary ports are open, and use Inspector to periodically scan the backend instances. Security groups act as virtual firewalls controlling inbound and outbound traffic. Reviewing them ensures only necessary ports are open, reducing the attack surface. Inspector provides automated security assessments to identify vulnerabilities and security issues in EC2s. An engineer discovered a vulnerability in an app running on ECS. The vulnerability allowed attackers to install malicious code. Analysis of the code shows it exfiltrates data on port 5353 in batches at random time intervals. While the code of the containers is being patched, how can engineers quickly identify all compromised hosts and stop the egress of data on port 5353? Create a CloudWatch custom metric on the VPC flow logs identifying egress traffic on port 5353. Update the NACLs to block port 5353 outbound. The VPC flow logs capture network traffic metadata that can be analyzed for specific ports. Creating CloudWatch metrics on this data enables monitoring of port 5353 traffic, while updating NACLs provides immediate network level blocking of the exfiltration pathway. A company's director of information security wants a daily email report from AWS that contains recommendations for each company account to meet AWS security best practices. What solution would meet these requirements? In every AWS account, configure Lambda to query the AWS Support API for Trusted Advisor security checks. Send results from Lambda to an SNS topic to send reports. Trusted Advisor provides security recommendations through the Support API. Lambda can automate daily queries across accounts and use SNS to deliver email reports, providing centralized security posture reporting with AWS best practice recommendations. The company wants to deploy a continuous security threat detection service at scale to automatically analyze all the company's member accounts in AWS organizations within the AP East 1 region. When the company creates a new member account, the threat detection service will automatically analyze the new account so that the company can review findings from the security account. What solution uses AWS security best practices and meets these requirements with the least effort? Activate Guard Duty in AP East 1. Designate the security account as the Guard Duty delegated administrator by using the console. Guard Duty with a delegated admin account automatically manages threat detection across all organization member accounts, including new accounts. The security account, not the management account, follows the best practices for security service administration and provides centralized findings review. Two EC2 instances in different subnets should be able to connect to each other but can't. It's been confirmed that other hosts in the same subnet are allowed to communicate successfully, and that security groups have valid allow rules in place to permit this traffic. What are the troubleshooting steps to perform? Check the inbound and outbound NACL rules. Look for deny rules. Since security groups have valid allow rules and other hosts communicate successfully, the issue likely lies within NACLs. NACLs operate at the subnet level and use explicit deny rules that can override security group allow rules, blocking specific traffic patterns. A company security officer is concerned about the risks of AWS account root user logins and is assigned a security engineer to implement a notification solution for near real-time alerts upon account root user logins. How should the engineer meet these requirements? Run CloudTrail logs through CloudWatch events to detect account root user logins and trigger a Lambda function to send an SNS notification to the security team's distribution list. CloudTrail logs all API calls, including the root user activities. CloudTrail events filter these logs in real time for root user logins, triggering Lambda functions that send immediate SNS notifications to security teams for rapid incident response. The company has many member accounts in an organization in AWS organizations. The company is concerned about the potential for misuse of the AWS account root user credentials for member accounts in the organization. To address this issue, the company wants to ensure that even if the account root user credentials are compromised, the account is still protected. What meets this requirement? Block service access by using SCPs, service control policies, for the root user. SCPs can explicitly deny actions for root user across organization accounts, providing guardrails even if root credentials are compromised. This preventative control limits the blast radius of root user level compromise by restricting available actions at the organization level. The company's chief security officer has requested that a security analyst review and improve the security posture of each company AWS account. The security analyst decides to do this by improving AWS account root user security. What actions should the security analyst take to meet these requirements? Delete the access keys for the account root user in every account. Implement a strong password to help protect account level access to the management console by the account root user, and enable multi-factor authentication on every account root user in all accounts. Root user security requires eliminating programmatic access, so deleting the access keys, strengthening authentication, so the strong passwords and MFA, and following the AWS security best practices. The root user should only be used for specific account management tasks, not daily operations. A security engineer needs to ensure their company's use of AWS meets AWS security best practices. As part of this, the AWS account root user must not be used for daily work. The root user must be not monitored for use, and the security team must be alerted as quickly as possible if the root user is used. What solution does this? Set up a CloudWatch events rule that triggers an SNS notification. CloudWatch events can monitor CloudTrail logs for root user activities and trigger immediate SNS notifications. This provides real-time alerting when root user access occurs, enabling rapid security team response while supporting the best practice of avoiding root user for daily operations. The company has multiple AWS accounts that are part of AWS organizations. The company's security team wants to ensure that even those administrators with full access to the company's accounts are unable to access the company's S3 buckets. How should this be accomplished? Service control policies. Use service control policies provide organization level guardrails that can deny S3 access even for admins with full IAM permissions. SCPs act as permission boundaries that cannot be overridden by local account policies, ensuring S3 access restrictions across all organization accounts. A company uses HTTP live streaming, HLS, to stream live video content to paying subscribers by using CloudFront. HLS splits the video content in chunks so that the user can request the right chunk based on different conditions. Because the video events last for several hours, the total video is made up of thousands of chunks. The origin URL is not disclosed, and every user is forced to access the CloudFront URL. The company has a web app that authenticates the paying users against an internal repo and a CloudFront key pair that is already issued. What's the simplest and most effective way to protect the content? Develop the application to use the CloudFront key pair to set the signed cookies that users will use to access the content. Signed cookies are ideal for HLS streaming with multiple chunks because they provide access to multiple files with a single authentication token, unlike signed URLs, which require individual signatures for each chunk. Signed cookies work efficiently for thousands of video chunks and long-duration streaming events. An organization policy states all encryption keys must be automatically rotated every 12 months. Which AWS Key Management Service key type should be used to meet this requirement? AWS Managed Customer Master Key. So AWS Managed CMKs automatically rotate every year, 12 months, without any customer configuration required. This meets the policy requirement for automatic annual rotation while providing managed encryption services for AWS resources. The company has decided to use AWS Key Management Service for all of its encryption keys. The company plans to create all of its keys as customer managed CMKs and will not import any encryption keys. The company must rotate its encryption keys once every 12 months. What solution meets these requirements? Enable automatic key rotation for each customer managed CMK after it's been created in AWS KMS. Customer managed CMKs support automatic key rotation that can be enabled after creation. When enabled, KMS automatically rotates the key material annually while maintaining the same key ID and policies, meeting the 12-month rotation requirement. A company has a customer master key with imported key materials. Company policy requires that all encryption keys must be rotated every year. What can be done to implement the above policy? Create a new CMK key, a new CMK, import the new key material to it, and point the key alias to the new CMK. CMKs with imported key material cannot use custom automatic rotation. Manual rotation requires creating a new CMK with new imported key material and updating the key alias to point to the new CMK, providing seamless application transition while meeting rotation requirements. A security engineer is responsible for providing secure access to AWS resources for thousands of developers in a company's corporate identity provider. The developers access a set of AWS services from the corporate prem using IAM credentials. Due to the volume of requests for provisioning new IAM users, it's taking a long time to grant access permissions. The security engineer receives reports that developers are sharing their IAM credentials with others to avoid provisioning delays. This causes concern about overall security for the security engineer. What action will meet the program requirements that address this? Create a federation between AWS and the existing corporate IDP. Leverage IAM roles to provide federated access to AWS resources. Identity federation eliminates the need for individual IAM users by allowing developers to use their corporate credentials to assume IAM roles. This scales automatically, reduces provisioning overhead, and prevents credential sharing while maintaining centralized identity management through the existing corporate IDP. A company requires that SSH commands used to access its instances be traceable to the user who executed each command. How would a security engineer do this? Deny inbound access on port 22 at the security group attached to the instance. Use Systems Manager Sessions Manager for shell access to EC2s with the user tag defined. Enable CloudWatch logging for Systems Manager sessions. Sessions Manager provides auditable shell access without requiring SSH keys or open ports. CloudWatch logging captures all session activities with user attribution, providing complete traceability of commands executed while maintaining security by eliminating direct SSH access. A company has a requirement that no EC2 security group can allow SSH access from the CIDR block 0.0. The company wants to monitor compliance with this requirement at all times and wants to receive a near real-time notification if any security group is non-compliant. A security engineer has configured AWS config and will use the restricted SSH manage rule to monitor the security groups. What should the engineer do next to meet the requirements? Configure an event bridge, which is CloudWatch events, event rule that is invoked by a compliance change event from AWS config for the restricted SSH managed rule. Configure the event rule to target an SNS topic that will provide a notification. EventBridge can monitor config rule compliance changes in real time and trigger SNS notifications immediately when the restrict SSH rule detects non-compliant security groups, providing automated compliance monitoring and alerting. A company's information security team wants to analyze Amazon or EC2 performance and utilization in near real time for anomalies. A security engineer is responsible for log aggregation. The engineer must collect logs from all the company's AWS accounts in a centralized location to perform the analysis. How should the engineer do this? Set up a CloudWatch cross-account log data sharing with the subscriptions in each account. Send the logs to Amazon Kinesis Data Firehose in the security engineer's account. CloudWatch cross-account log sharing with Kinesis Data Firehose enables real-time log aggregation from multiple accounts into a centralized location. This provides near real-time data access needed for anomaly analysis while maintaining scalable log processing capabilities. A security engineer is setting up the CloudTrail trail for all regions in an AWS account. For added security, the logs are stored using server-side encryption with KMS managed keys and have log integrity validation enabled. While testing the solution, the security engineer discovers that the digest files are readable, but the log files are not. What's the most likely cause? The KMS key policy does not grant the security engineer's IAM user or role permissions to decrypt it. So CloudTrail digest files are not encrypted with the same KMS key as the log files. The security engineer needs explicit KMS decrypt permissions in the key policy to access encrypted log files, while digest files remain accessible for integrity validation purposes. A security engineer is created in an Amazon Cognito pool. The engineer needs to manually verify the ID and access token sent by the application for troubleshooting purposes. What's the most secure way to accomplish this? Search for the public key with the key ID that matches the key ID in the header of the token. Then use a JSON Web Token library to validate the signature of the token and extract values, such as the expiry date. A proper JWT validation requires verifying the token signature using the matching public key from Cognito's published keys. This ensures token authenticity and integrity before extracting claims, providing secure validation without exposing sensitive information. The security engineer launches two EC2 instances in the same VPC but in separate availability zones. Each instance has a public IP and is able to connect to external hosts on the internet. The two instances are able to communicate with each other by using private IP addresses, but they are not able to communicate to each other when using their public IP addresses. What action should the engineer take to allow communications over the public IP addresses? Add the public IP addresses to the ingress rules of the instance security groups. Security groups by default allow outbound traffic but restrict inbound traffic. To enable communication using public IPs, the security groups must include ingress rules allowing traffic from the other instance's public IP, as public IP communication is treated as external traffic. A company uses multiple AWS accounts managed with AWS organizations. The security engineers have created a standard set of security groups for all accounts. The security policy requires that these security groups be used for all applications and delegates modification authority to the security team only. A recent security audit found that the security groups are inconsistently implemented across accounts and that unauthorized changes have been made to the security groups. A security engineer needs to recommend a solution to improve consistency and to prevent unauthorized changes in the individual accounts in the future. What solution should the engineer recommend? Use Firewall Manager to create a security group policy. Enable the policy feature to identify and revert local changes, and enable automatic remediation. Firewall Manager provides centralized security group management across organizations' accounts with automatic remediation capabilities. It can detect unauthorized changes and automatically revert them, ensuring consistent security group implementation and preventing unauthorized modifications. A company's security information events management, the SIM tool, receives new CloudTrail logs from an S3 bucket that is configured to send all objects created event notifications to an SNS topic. An SQS queue is subscribed to this SNS topic. The company's SIM tools then polls this SQS queue for new messages using an IAM role and fetches new log of events from the S3 bucket based on the SQS messages. After a recent security review that resulted in restricted permissions, the SIM tool has stopped receiving new CloudTrail logs. What's the solution? What are the solutions or the possible causes for this? The SQS queue doesn't allow SQS send message action from the SNS topic. The SNS topic does not allow the SNS publish action from the S3. The S3 bucket policy does not allow CloudTrail to perform the put object action. The logging pipeline requires proper permissions at each stage. S3 bucket policy must allow CloudTrail put object actions. SNS topic must allow S3 publish actions. The SQS queue must allow SNS send message actions. Any missing permission breaks the pipeline flow to the SIM tool. A city is implementing an election results reporting website that will use CloudFront. The website runs on a fleet of EC2s behind an application load balancer in an auto-scaling group. Election results are updated hourly and are stored as PDF files in an S3 bucket. A security engineer needs to ensure that all external access to the website goes through CloudFront. What solution does this? Create origin access identity in CloudFront, modify the S3 bucket policy to allow only the new OAI to access the bucket contents. Associate the ALB with a security group that allows only incoming traffic from the CloudFront service to communicate with the ALB. OAI ensures S3 content is accessible only through CloudFront, not directly. So security groups restricting ALB access to CloudFront service IP ranges ensure dynamic content also flows through CloudFront, providing complete edge security for the election reporting's website. The company is using AWS Secret Manager to store secrets that are encrypted using the CMK and are stored in the security account. One of the company's production accounts must retrieve the secret values from the security account. A security engineer needs to apply a policy to the secret in the security account based on least privilege access so the production account can retrieve the secret value only. What policy should be applied? A policy that allows get secret value action for the production account with the appropriate conditions for least privilege access. Cross-account secrets manager access requires a resource-based policy on the secret that allows the production account to perform get secret value actions. The policy should include appropriate conditions to ensure least privilege access while enabling the necessary secret retrieval functionality. A company's policy requires all API keys be encrypted and stored separately from source code in a centralized security account. This security account is managed by the company's security team. However, an audit revealed that an API key is stored with the source code of an AWS Lambda function in AWS code commit repo in the DevOps account. How should the security team securely store the API key? Create a secret in Secrets Manager in the security account to store the API key using KMS. For encryption, grant access to the IAM role by the Lambda function so that the function can retrieve the key from the Secrets Manager and call the API. Secrets Manager in the centralized security account provides encrypted storage with KMS and cross-account access capabilities. The Lambda function can retrieve the API key at runtime using appropriate IAM permissions, separating secrets from source code while maintaining centralized security control. The company has a forensic logging tool use case whereby several hundred applications running on Docker on EC2 need to send logs to a central location. The security engineer must create a logging solution that is able to perform real-time analytics on the logs. Grant log files grants the ability to replay events and persist data. What AWS services can satisfy this? Elasticsearch and Kinesis. So Kinesis provides real-time log ingestion and the ability to replay events from different time points. Elasticsearch enables real-time analytics and search capabilities on log data. Together, they provide a complete forensic logging solution with persistence, analytics, and replay capabilities. A security engineer is troubleshooting a connectivity issue between a web server that's writing log files to the logging server in another VPC. The engineer has confirmed that a peering relationship exists between the two VPCs. VPC flow logs show that requests sent from the web server are accepted by the logging server, but the web server never received a reply. What are the following actions could fix this issue? Add a route to the route table associated with the subnet that hosts the logging server that targets the peering connection. VPC peering requires bidirectional routing configuration. The logging server can receive requests showing in flow logs as accepted, but return traffic cannot reach the web server because the logging server's subnet route table lacks a route back through the peering connection to the web server's VPC. An engineer is troubleshooting connectivity of a test environment that includes a virtual security appliance deployed inline. In addition to using the virtual security appliance, the dev team wants to use security groups and NACLs to accomplish various security requirements in the environment. What configuration is necessary to allow the virtual security appliance to route traffic? Disable the network source destination check on the security appliance's Elastic Network Interface. EC2s by default perform source destination checks that prevent them from forwarding traffic where they are not the source or destination. Virtual security appliances deployed inline must have this check disabled to function as a network routing device and inspect traffic flows. Company security engineers copying all application logs to centralized S3 buckets. Currently, each of the company's applications is in its own account, and logs are pushed to S3s associated with each account. The engineer will deploy an AWS Lambda into each account that copies the relevant logs to the centralized S3. The security engineer is unable to access the log files in the centralized S3. Why is the engineer unable to do this? The object ACLs are not being updated to allow the users within the centralized account to access the objects. When Lambda copies objects between accounts, the object ACLs retain the original account ownership unless explicitly updated. The copied objects maintain their original ACLs, preventing the centralized account users from accessing them even though the bucket policy allows access. A security engineer has created a CloudWatch event that invokes a Lambda function daily. The Lambda function runs an Amazon Athena query that checks AWS CloudTrail logs in S3 to detect whether any IAM user accounts or credentials have been created in the past 30 days. The results of the Athena query are created in the same S3. The engineer runs a test execution of the Lambda function via the console, and the function runs successfully. After several minutes, the engineer finds that this Athena query has failed with the error message, insufficient permissions. What's causing this? The Lambda function does not have permissions to access the CloudTrail S3 bucket. So Athena queries execute using the Lambda function's IAM role permissions. While the Lambda function can start the query, Athena needs S3 permissions to read CloudTrail logs and write results. The Lambda role requires S3 get object permissions for CloudTrail logs and put object permissions for query results. The startup company hosts a fleet of EC2s and private subnets using the latest Amazon 2 AMI. The company's engineers rely heavily on SSH access to instances for troubleshooting. The company needs to increase security controls around SSH access and provide auditing of commands run by the engineers. What strategy should the architect use? Create an IAM role with the Amazon SSM Managed Instance Core Managed Policy attached. Attach the IAM role to all EC2s. Remove all security group rules attached to the EC2 instances that allow inbound TCP on port 22. Have the engineers install the Systems Manager Sessions Manager plugin for their devices and remotely access the instances by using the Start Session API from the Systems Manager. Sessions Manager provides secure, auditable access without requiring SSH keys or open ports. The SSM Managed Instance Core policy enables SSM functionality, and Sessions Manager logs all commands for auditing purposes while eliminating traditional SSH attack vectors. The company has Lambda functions that needs read access to an S3 that's located in the same AWS account. What solution meets these requirements in the most secure manner? Apply an IAM role to the Lambda function. Apply an IAM policy to the role to grant read access to the S3 bucket. IAM roles provide temporary credentials that follow security best practices. Attaching a role with specific S3 read permissions to the Lambda function ensures secure, auditable access without embedding long-term credentials in the function code. A security engineer needs to create an S3 bucket policy to grant least privileged read access to IAM user accounts that are named User 1, User 2, and User 3. These IAM user accounts are members of the Authorized People IAM group. The security engineer drafts an S3 bucket policy but receives a missing required field principal error. The security engineer needs to add principal element to the policy. The addition must provide read access to only User 1, User 2, and User 3. What solution does this? Add the individual user arns as principals in the principal element of the bucket policy. So S3 bucket policies require explicit principal elements. To grant access to specific users, their individual arns must be listed as principals. While the users are in a group, bucket policies need explicit user arns rather than group references for precise access control. The company has decided to move its fleet of Linux-based web server instances to an EC2 autoscaling group. Currently, the instances are static and are launched manually. When an admin needs to view the log files, the admin uses SSH to establish a connection to the instances and retrieves the logs manually. The company often needs to query the logs to produce results about application sessions and user issues. The company doesn't want its new automatically scaling architecture to result in the loss of any log files when instances are scaled in. What combinations of steps should a security engineer take to meet the requirements most cost effectively? Configure CloudWatch agents on the instances to forward the logs to CloudWatch logs. Configure CloudWatch logs insights to query the log files. So CloudWatch agents automatically forward logs to CloudWatch logs, ensuring persistence beyond instance lifecycle in autoscaling groups. CloudWatch Logs Insights provides powerful querying capabilities for log analysis without additional infrastructure costs, making it the most cost-effective solution. A company maintains sensitive data in an Amazon S3 bucket that must be protected using AWS KMS CMK. The company requires that keys be automatically rotated every year. How should the bucket be configured? Select server-side encryption with AWS KMS managed keys, and select an alias to an AWS managed CMK. AWS managed CMKs automatically rotate annually without customer intervention. Using SSE KMS with an AWS managed CMK provides the required encryption with automatic yearly rotation, meeting both security and compliance requirements for sensitive data protection. A company maintains an open source application that is hosted on a public GitHub repo. While creating a new commit to the repo, an engineer uploaded their AWS access key and secret access keys. The engineer reported their mistake to a manager, and the manager immediately disabled the access key. The company needs to assess the impact of the exposed access key. A security engineer must recommend a solution that requires the least possible managerial overhead. What solution does this? Analyze the credential report in AWS Identity and Access Management to see when the access key was last used. IAM Credential Reports provides a comprehensive information about access key usage, including last used dates and services access. This built-in AWS feature requires minimal overhead compared to analyzing logs manually and provides direct insights into the potential impact of exposed credentials. The solutions architect is designing a web app that uses CloudFront, an elastic load balancing application load balancer, and an auto-scaling group of EC2s. The load balancer and EC2s are in US West region. It's been decided that encryption in transit is necessary by using a customer-branded domain name from the client to CloudFront and from CloudFront to the load balancer. Assuming the certificate manager is used, how many certificates will need to be generated? One in US West and one in US East. CloudFront requires certificates be in US East region due to its global nature, and the ALB requires a certificate in its deployment region, the US West. Therefore, two certificates are needed in different regions to enable end-to-end encryption in transit. A large company has hundreds of AWS accounts. The company needs to provide its employees with access to these accounts. The solution must maximize scalability and operational efficiency. What solution meets these requirements? Implement Cloud Control Tower for multi-account management by integrating single sign-on with the company's existing identity provider. Create IAM roles for the identity provider to assume. Control Tower with SSO provides enterprise scale identity management across hundreds of accounts. Integration with existing identity providers enables centralized user management, while IAM roles provide granular access control, maximizing both scalability and operational efficiency. The company is running an Amazon RDS multi-AZ DB instance inside VPC. The DB is using two subnets that provide a default route to the internet through a NAT gateway. The company also has application servers that run on EC2s that use the RDS database. The company has deployed these EC2s into two other private subnets within the same VPC. These EC2s use a default route to access the internet through the same NAT gateway. Each subnet in the VPC uses its own unique route table. After a recent security audit, the company added a new security requirement. The DB instance must never be able to connect to the internet. A security engineer must make this change immediately without disrupting the application server's network traffic. How can this be done? Modify the route tables of the DC instance subnets to remove the default route to the NAT gateway. Removing the default route from the DB subnet route tables prevents internet connectivity while maintaining application server access. This approach isolates the database from the internet access without affecting application server routing or requiring infrastructure changes. A company has a group of EC2s in a single private subnet of a VPC with no internet gateway attached. A security engineer has installed CloudWatch Agent on all instances in that subnet to capture logs from a specific application. To ensure that the logs flow securely, the company's networking team has created VPC endpoints for CloudWatch monitoring and CloudWatch logs. The networking team has attached the endpoints to the VPC. The application is generating logs. However, when the security engineer queries CloudWatch, the logs do not appear. Which combination of steps should the security engineer take to troubleshoot this issue? Ensure the EC2 instance profile that's attached to the EC2s has permissions to create log streams and write logs. Check the CloudWatch agent configuration file on each EC2 to make sure the CloudWatch agent is collecting the proper log files. Check the VPC endpoint policies of both VPC endpoints to ensure the EC2s have permissions to use them. CloudWatch logging requires proper IAM permissions for the instances, correct agent configuration to collect the right logs, and VPC endpoint policies that allow the instances to use the endpoints. All three components must be properly configured for logs to flow through VPC endpoints. A company is using ECS to run its container-based apps on AWS. The company needs to ensure that the container images contain no severe vulnerabilities. The company must also ensure that only specific IAM roles and specific AWS accounts can access the container images. Which solution will meet these requirements with the least management overhead? Pull images from the public container registry. Publish the images to ECR repos with scan on push configured in a centralized AWS account. Use a CI/CD pipeline to deploy the images to different AWS accounts. Use repo policies and identity-based policies to restrict access to which IAM principals and accounts can access the images. ECR with scan on push provides automated vulnerability scanning with minimal overhead. Repo policies combined with identity-based policies provide granular access control across accounts, while the centralized approach simplifies image management and security enforcement. A company wants to establish separate AWS KMS service keys to use for different AWS services. The company's security engineer created a key policy to allow the infrastructure deployment team to create encrypted EBS volumes by assuming the infrastructure deployment IAM role. The security engineer recently discovered that IAM roles other than infrastructure deployment role use this key for other services. Which change to the policy should the security engineer make to resolve these issues? In the policy document, remove the statement block that contains the SID enable IAM user permissions. Add key management policies to the KMS policy. The enable IAM user permissions statement typically grants broad access that allows other roles to use the key. Removing this overly permissive statement and adding specific key management policies restricts access to only the intended infrastructure deployment role for EBS operations. A company has enabled guard duty in all regions as part of its security monitoring strategy. In one of the VPCs, the company hosts an EC2 instance working as an FTP server that is contacted by a high number of clients from multiple locations. This is identified by guard duty as a brute force attack due to the high number of connections that happen every hour. The finding has been flagged as a false positive. However, guard duty keeps raising the issue. Security engineer has been asked to improve the signal to noise ratio. The engineer needs to ensure that changes do not compromise the visibility of potential anomalous behavior. How can the engineer address the issue? Use guard duty filters with auto archiving enabled to close the findings. Guard duty filters with auto archiving automatically suppress known false positives while maintaining the underlying detection capability. This improves signal to noise ratio for legitimate threats while preserving guard duty's ability to detect actual anomalous behavior patterns. A company uses guard duty to detect threats and malicious activities in AWS accounts. The company has subscribed to a third-party threat intelligence list uploaded to an S3 bucket. How should the security engineer efficiently use the threat list across all company AWS accounts? Ensure guard duty is in master member configuration. Add the threat list to the master account referencing the S3 object that contains the threat list. Guard Duty Master Member configuration allows centralized management of threat intelligence lists. Adding the threat list to the master account automatically distributes it to all member accounts, providing efficient and consistent threat detection across the organization. A company is hosting multiple applications within a single VPC in its AWS account. The applications are running behind an application load balancer that is associated with the WAF web ACL. The company's security team has identified that multiple port scans are originating from a specific range of IP addresses on the internet. The security engineer needs to define access from the offending IPs. What solution does this? Modify the AWS web ACL with an IP set match rule statement to deny incoming requests from the IP address range. AWS WAF IP set match rule provides efficient blocking of specific IP address ranges at the application layer. This approach stops malicious traffic before it reaches the applications while maintaining granular control over blocked IP addresses. A company has two software development teams that are creating applications that store sensitive data in S3. Each team's data must always be separate. The company security team must design a data encryption strategy for both teams that provides the ability to audit key usage. The solution must also minimize operational overhead. What should the security team recommend? Tell the application teams to use two different S3s with separate AWS Key Management Service customer managed CMKs. Limit the key policy to allow encryption and decryption of the CMKs to their respective teams only. Force the teams to use encryption context to encrypt and decrypt. Customer managed CMKs provide audit trails and fine grained access control per team. Encryption context enables detailed audit logging of key usage patterns, while separate keys ensure complete data separation between teams with minimal operational overhead. Okay. An Amazon EC2 auto-scaling group launches Amazon Linux EC2 instances and installs CloudWatch agent to publish logs to CloudWatch logs. The EC2 instances launch with an IAM role that has an IAM policy attached. Policy provides access to publish custom metrics to CloudWatch. The EC2s run in a private subnet inside the VPC. The VPC provides access to the internet for private subnets through a NAT gateway. The security engineer notices that no logs are being published to CloudWatch logs for the EC2s and that the auto-scaling group launches. The security engineer validates that CloudWatch logs agent is running and is configured properly on the EC2s. In addition, the security engineer validates that network communications are working properly with AWS services. What can the security engineer do to ensure that logs are published to CloudWatch logs? Configure the IAM policy in use by the IAM role to have access to the required CloudWatch star API actions that will publish logs. The existing IAM policy only allows custom metrics publishing, but lacks CloudWatch logs permissions. The role needs specific CloudWatch logs API permissions like log create log group, logs create log stream, logs put log event to publish log data to CloudWatch logs. The company has a web application that runs behind an application load balancer. The application has experienced a credential stuffing attack that is producing many failed login attempts. The attack is coming from many IPs. The login attempts are using a user agent string of a known mobile device emulator. The security engineer needs to implement a solution to mitigate the credential stuffing attack. The solution must still allow legitimate logins to the application. Which solution will meet these requirements? Create an AWS web ACL for the application load balancer. Create a custom rule that blocks requests that contain the user agent string of the device emulator. AWS WAF can inspect HTTP headers, including user agent strings, to block malicious requests. Creating a custom rule to block the specific device emulator user agent string effectively mitigates the credential stuffing attack while allowing legitimate traffic with different user agents. A DevOps team is planning to deploy a containerized application on Amazon Elastic or ECS. The team will use an application load balancer to distribute the incoming traffic for the ECS application. A security engineer needs to terminate the TLS traffic at the load balancer to ensure app security of data in transit. What solutions can the engineer use to create a certificate and deploy the certificate at the load balancer to meet the requirements? Use TLS tools to create a certificate signing request to get the certificate, the CSR, signed by a certificate authority to produce a certificate. Import the certificate into Certificate Manager. Specify the certificate for the TLS listener on the load balancer. Use Certificate Manager to request a certificate. Specify the certificate for the TLS listener on the load balancer. Certificate Manager provides both certificate request services for AWS managed certificates and import capabilities for externally issued certificates. Both approaches enable TLS termination at the load balancer, ensuring encrypted data in transit while providing flexible certificate management options. A company is running an Amazon RDS for MySQL database instance and a VPC. The VPC must not send or receive network traffic through the internet. A security engineer wants to use Secrets Manager to rotate the database instance credentials automatically. Because of a security policy, the security engineer cannot use the standard AWS Lambda function that Secrets Manager provides to rotate the credentials. The security engineer deploys a custom Lambda function in the VPC. The custom Lambda function will be responsible for rotating the secret in Secrets Manager. The security engineer edits the DB instance's security group to allow connections from this function. When the function is invoked, the function cannot communicate with Secrets Manager to rotate the secret properly. What should the security engineer do so that this can function? Configure a Secrets Manager interface VPC endpoint. Include the Lambda function's private subnet during the configuration process. VPC endpoints enable private connectivity to AWS services without internet access. Creating a Secrets Manager interface VPC endpoint allows the Lambda function to communicate with Secrets Manager while maintaining the VPC's isolation from the internet. Security engineer needs to build a solution to turn CloudTrail back on in multiple AWS regions in case it's ever turned off. What's the most efficient way to use this? Use config with the managed rule to initiate the AWS enable CloudTrail remediation. Config provides automated remediation capabilities through managed rules. The CloudTrail enabled managed rule can detect when CloudTrail is disabled and automatically trigger remediation actions to re-enable it across multiple regions with minimal operational overhead. A public subnet contains two EC2s. The subnet has a custom network ACL. A security engineer is designing a solution to improve the subnet security. The solution must allow outbound traffic to an internet service that uses TLS through port 443. The solution also must deny inbound traffic that's destined for MySQL port 3306. Which NACL rule meets these requirements? Use inbound rule 100 to allow traffic on TCP port 443. Use inbound rule 200 to deny traffic on TCP port 3306. Use outbound rule 100 to allow traffic on TCP port 443. Oh, sorry. NACLs require explicit allow rules for desired traffic and explicit deny rules for blocked traffic. Allowing inbound traffic from port 443 enables return traffic for TLS connections. Denying inbound port 3306 blocks MySQL access. And allowing outbound port 443 enables TLS connections to internet services. A security engineer is configuring a mechanism to send an alert when 3 or more failed sign-in attempts to AWS Management Console occur in a 5-minute period. The security engineer creates a trail in CloudTrail to assist in this work. Which solution meets these requirements? Configure CloudTrail to send events to Amazon CloudWatch logs. Create a metric filter for the relevant log group. Create a filter pattern with event name matching console login and error message matching failed authentication. Create a CloudWatch alarm with a threshold of 3 in a period of 5 minutes. CloudTrail logs console sign-in attempts which can be analyzed using CloudWatch logs metric filters. Creating a filter for failed console login events and setting up a CloudWatch alarm with appropriate thresholds enables automated alerting for multiple failed sign-in attempts. A company security engineer receives an abuse notification from AWS. The notification indicates someone is hosting malware from the company's AWS account after investigation. The security engineer finds a new S3 bucket that an IAM user created without authorization. What combination of steps should the security engineer take to minimize the consequences of this compromise? Change the password for all IAM users, rotate or delete all AWS access keys, delete any resources that are unrecognized or unauthorized. When facing account compromise, immediate credential rotation prevents further unauthorized access, while removing unauthorized resources eliminates the immediate threat. Comprehensive credential management, like passwords and access keys, ensures the attacker cannot maintain persistent access. A company has a web server in AWS Cloud. The company will store the content for the web server in an S3 bucket. A security engineer must use a CloudFront distribution to speed up delivery of the content. None of the files can be publicly accessible from the S3 directly. What solution will meet these requirements? Create an origin access control, associate the OAC with the CloudFront distribution, configure the S3 bucket permissions so that only the OAC can access the files in the S3 bucket. Origin access control is the modern approach to secure S3 origins for CloudFront. OAC ensures S3 is only accessible through CloudFront, not directly from the internet, while providing better security features than the legacy origin access identity. Okay. Company does not allow the permanent installation of SSH keys onto an Amazon Linux EC2. However, 3 employees who have IAM user accounts require access to the EC2. The employees must use an SSH session to perform critical duties. How can a security engineer provide the appropriate access to the EC2 instance to meet these requirements? Use Systems Manager Sessions Manager. Provide the IAM user accounts with the permissions to use Systems Manager Sessions Manager. Systems Manager provides SSH-like access without requiring permanent SSH keys on the instance. IAM permissions control access, and sessions are auditable while maintaining the company's policy against permanent SSH key installation. A company wants to prevent SSH access through the use of SSH key pairs for any Amazon Linux EC2 in its account. However, a systems admin occasionally will need to access these EC2s through SSH in an emergency. For auditing purposes, the company needs to record any commands that a user runs in an EC2. What should the security engineer do to configure access to these EC2s to meet requirements? A Systems Manager Sessions Manager. Configure Sessions Manager to save all commands that are entered in a session to an S3 bucket. Provide the EC2 instances with an IAM role that allows Systems Manager to manage the EC2s. Configure an IAM account for the systems admin. Provide an IAM policy that allows the IAM account to use Sessions Manager. Sessions Manager eliminates the need for SSH keys while providing emergency access capabilities. Configuring session logging to S3 ensures all commands are audited, meeting both security and compliance requirements without maintaining permanent SSH access methods. A company is using AWS organizations to manage multiple AWS accounts. The company has an application that allows users to assume the app user IAM role to download files from an S3 bucket that's encrypted with an AWS KMS CMK. However, when users try to access the files in the S3, they get an access denied error. What should the engineer do to troubleshoot this? Ensure the KMS policy allows the app user role to have permissions to decrypt for the CMK. Ensure the S3 policy allows the app user role to have permission to get objects for the S3. Ensure that service control policies within the organization allows access to the S3. Accessing encrypted S3 objects requires permissions at multiple levels. KMS permissions to decrypt objects, S3 permissions to access the bucket and objects, and SCP permissions that don't block the required actions. All three layers must allow the necessary access. A company is building applications in containers. The company wants to migrate its on-prem development and operation services from its on-prem data center to AWS. Management states that production systems must be cloud agnostic and use the same configuration and admin tools across production systems. A solutions architect needs to design a managed solution that will align with open source software. What solution meets these requirements? Launch the containers on EKS and EKS worker nodes. EKS provides managed Kubernetes service that maintains compatibility with open source Kubernetes. This enables cloud-agnostic deployments using standard Kubernetes configurations and tools that can work across different cloud providers on and on-prem environments. A company uses infrastructure as code to create AWS infrastructure. The company writes the code in CloudFormation templates to deploy the infrastructure. The company has an existing CI/CD pipeline that the company can use to deploy the templates. After a recent security audit, the company decides to adopt a policy as code approach to improve the company's security posture on AWS. The company must prevent the deployment of any infrastructure that would violate the security policy, such as an unencrypted EBS volume, which would meet these requirements. Create rule sets in CloudFormation Guard. Run validation checks for CloudFormation templates as a phase of the CI/CD process. CloudFormation Guard enables policy as code by validating CloudFormation templates against security rules before deployment. Integrating Guard into the pipeline prevents non-compliant infrastructure deployment while maintaining the existing development workflow. Security engineer is setting up a new AWS account. The engineer has been asked to continuously monitor the company's AWS account using automated compliance checks based on AWS best practices and CIS AWS Foundation's benchmarks. How can the engineer accomplish this using AWS services? Enable config and set it to record all resources in all regions and global resources. Then enable Security Hub and confirm that CIS AWS Foundation's compliance standard is enabled. AWS Config records resource configurations, while Security Hub provides compliance checking against standards like CIS Foundation's benchmark. Together, they provide comprehensive automated compliance monitoring that evaluates AWS accounts against established security benchmarks. A company uses organizations to manage several AWS accounts. The company processes a large volume of sensitive data. The company uses a serverless approach to microservices. The company stores all the data in either S3 or DynamoDB. The company reads the data by using either Lambda functions or container-based services that the company hosts on EKS or on Fargate. The company must implement a solution to encrypt all the data at rest and enforce least privileged data access control. The company creates a key management service, customer managed key. What should the company do next? Create a key policy that allows AMS decrypt action only for S3, DynamoDB, Lambda, and EKS. Create a service control policy that denies the creation of S3 and DynamoDB tables that are not encrypted. The key policy restricts decrypt access to only the services that need it: S3, DynamoDB, Lambda, EKS, while the SCP enforces encryption requirements organization-wide by preventing creation of unencrypted resources. This ensures a comprehensive data protection. The security engineer is configuring AWS config for an account that uses a new IAM entity. When the security engineer tries to configure config rules and automatic remediation options, an error occurs. The CloudTrail logs, the security engineer sees the message, insufficient delivery policy to S3 bucket, doc example bucket, unable to write to bucket, provided S3 key prefix is null. What combinations of steps would need to be taken to remediate this? Check the S3 bucket policy. Verify the policy allows the config.amazonaws.com service to write the targeted bucket. Verify the IAM entity has the permissions necessary to perform getBucketACL or S3 getBucketACL and S3 put object star operation to write to the target bucket. Config requires specific S3 permissions to deliver configuration data. The bucket policy must allow the config.amazonaws.com service to write to the bucket, and the IAM entity must have permissions to perform bucket ACL and object operations for config delivery. A company is running a legacy app on EC2s in multiple availability zones behind a software load balancer that runs on an active standby set of EC2s. For disaster recovery, the company has created a warm standby version of the application environment that's deployed in another AWS region. Domain for the application uses a hosted zone from Route 53. The company needs the application to use static IPs, even in the case of a failover event to the secondary region. The company also requires the client's source IP address to be available for auditing. What solution meets these requirements with the least amount of operational overhead? Replace the software load balancer with an application load balancer. Create a global accelerator. Add an endpoint group for each region. Configure Route 53 health checks. Add an alias record that points to the accelerator. Global Accelerator provides static IP addresses that remain consistent during failover events and preserves client source IP addresses. Combined with a load balancer and Route 53 health checks, this solution provides automated failover with minimal operational overhead while meeting all requirements. I think we're going to stop here and we'll come back for part 8. Anyways, thank you for listening. I appreciate your time. Have a good day.